Hi.
Hi. Okay guys, so as already promised, we're going to go over the performance-based matchmaking, new ones here today. So I got Travis. What's actually your title? Main developer, lead designer?
You can go with that. God of all heroes.
God of all heroes? I think that's
just lead game designer.
Okay. So yeah, he's responsible largely for the new matchmaking system and can answer all our questions. Now of course we did the thread on Reddit and there were like 400 comments in there. We're not going to be able to go through every single one of them, but I think I got the gist of it over here and we're going to explain everything.
I think you got every single one of them in there. Yeah.
I mean, I tried. But yeah, so first of all, before we actually head into the specifics and explain how the system works, we should probably discuss what matchmaking actually is, because people confuse it quite a bit. So when we're talking about matchmaking, it's not quite the same as the quick match team composition.
No, very different. Matchmaking is very simple. It's the behind-the-scenes system that's just trying to put people of similar skill together so everybody has a fair game.
Yeah.
That's it.
And some people have also talked about the MVP system, for example. So jumping into the performance-based system, the one big difference that you guys need to understand is happening between the MVP system and what the performance-based matchmaking system, the upcoming system, is doing, is that the MVP system is actually looking at an isolated game. So it looks at 10 people in one game and tries to determine which one of those 10 people was the most valuable player. That has nothing to do with the new system where you're literally compared on the same hero against other heroes on your level of skill. Just to get that out of the way right at the start, since that caused a little bit of confusion.
Yeah, we actually mentioned the MVP system, the goals of it are very different too. That was basically just it's a kudos system. It's meant to, at the end of a game, find something that you can look at and say, this guy did really good. Give him an opportunity to give him a pat on the back. It's nothing to do with matchmaking. It wasn't trying to get that granularity. The formula behind it is a relatively simple thing that I threw together based on the stats we had at the time. So we would like to update it now that we've got this stuff coming on to have MVP use the same thing, so it is calling out the same stats. That's probably a more future thing.
Okay, it's actually cool. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, because right now you're going to have some weird situations crop up where somebody could end up getting a negative performance rating that they'll see in their rank adjustment and still get MVP because they're two different things. So.
Okay. Yeah, I guess makes sense. Depends on the game.
Yep, exactly.
That must have been a really bad game then, though.
It could be. It's just a weird state. It's going to happen because with millions of games being played all the time, edge cases always come up.
So the first thing to talk about is why a new matchmaking system? Like, what exactly triggered the new system? A lot of people have asked, okay, why do we need a new system in the first place?
Yeah, so first I should clarify, it's not a new system, it's an improvement on the existing system. So what we're doing is we're giving the system the ability to look at individual performance in the game and use that to modify how much MMR players are gaining or losing after a match. So before this, it was completely based off of wins and losses. Some modifiers in there for the skill of you versus your opposing team, that kind of thing. But all wins and losses, which works, but it can take a large number of games before people get to the skill rating they want, or that they actually should be at, because unless your skill is really different from everybody else around you, your impact on the match is being diluted across your entire team. Mm-hmm. So by looking at the individuals, it allows us to accelerate people to where they should be.
Yeah, so, I mean, we had a lot of examples when you could see that, for example, reaching a Grandmaster level, that grinding was one way to get there once that you passed a certain threshold that got you to at least into the ballpark.
Yeah, that was the example we showed at BlizzCon. It's the extreme example, and the system wasn't even fully implemented, but it still cut the number of games it took the person in half with the new system in place.
Yeah. So one of the things that he's just like referring to as well is the challenges that we've seen from some streamers where they said, hey, I take over a bronze account, and then I'm going to try to show that I can make it all the way to Grandmaster with that account. So as he said, cut it in half or even less games that were needed just because the system acknowledges now that you are so good that you should get additional points. But it brings us straight to the system, so let's talk a little bit about how exactly the system works. So right now, can you talk a little bit about the comparison, like how does the system evaluate if you played a good game or not?
Sure. So first off, you should clarify that winning and losing is still the biggest factor.
Yeah.
Like if you don't win the game, you're not going to get MMR no matter how well you did personally. Same thing with losing. You're always going to lose, or at absolute best, not gain anything when you lose a game. Now, beyond that, though, it's looking at about 20 different stats that are being tracked across the entire breadth of the game, and it's using those to evaluate how that particular player in that particular situation is doing. Everything is being sliced up for that situation. So it's the hero you're playing, the battleground you're on, the game mode you're in, the region you're in, and then there's modifiers in place for things like game time. So short games versus long games don't have any impact on the system because it's all being based off of the time of the game too.
Yeah. So coming also back then, one question, for example, was, hey, if I'm winning with a 3-level lead against another team, what actually prevents me from just like padding my stats a little bit by prolonging the game even further?
Yeah.
And so as you just explained, by just making sure that you divide by battleground, hero, and just look at it very isolated cases, even the game length taken into consideration, that literally doesn't affect anything. So after the game is basically played, you said you have 20 criteria, and those are also to an extent individual to the hero that is being played. Is that correct?
Well, the criteria are being measured for everybody, but how important they are is coming down to that particular situation. So what the system is doing is it's measuring these, and it's been doing this for a few months now, across every game that's being played, and then the data is being sliced up by that criteria I was talking about, and then the system is looking at, across the breadth of all the players, what's the difference in the stats between like a bronze player and a master player? It's more granularity in there, but it's looking to see what differentiates a lower skilled player and a higher skilled player. And based on that, it's weighting those 20 different factors in different ways.
Okay, and that was resulted in one grade that you get, basically how well you played the hero,
exactly.
and that is then measured against how do other players on your level of skill rate against you. So if you are way better than the average player on that hero, on that battleground, in that time interval on the map, then the system basically says, okay, this guy performs so well,
Yep.
he's definitely a lot better, and he's not really where he should be, he needs to be accelerated upwards. So if you win, you gain more points. If the game is lost, but you still excel at the hero, you lose less points
Yep.
than you would normally do. And of course, the same would then also be true if you completely underperform, meaning if you had like if you are, for example, in a game where the system literally can tell, okay, you are not as good as the rank you're currently in, so then if the game is won, you would win less points, and if the game is lost, you would lose more points.
Correct, yeah. The goal is just to accelerate you to where you should be for your MMR so that you're being put in the right matches.
So one of the questions that popped up with that immediately is, does that mean immediately that I'm getting massively punished if I have one bad game?
No. Yeah, so again, the thing about matchmaking rating is that we're trying to make a good reflection of skill at all times, and player skill doesn't dramatically change game over game, so the adjustments are relatively minor. If you have one bad game, yeah, that particular game you're going to take a larger hit than you would normally, but as long as you're consistently doing well, it's going to wash out over the next 10, 20 games, whatever that happens to be.
So you talked a bit about the criteria, and one of the questions that popped up quite a lot is if choices that you make on the hero are also going to be taken into account, especially when we're talking about talents.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about talents, most importantly, heroic abilities. As for example, Varian comes into mind, where he's a multi-class hero. The choice of your heroic influences quite highly how you play the hero. And on Tacita, for example, you have Archon compared to a Force Ball. So how does the system measure that, or does it take those things into account too?
It was one of the pieces we looked into when we first got into this. And it turns out, because we're looking at so many different factors and they're all being weighted, that the end rating it's not really impacted that much by the alt choice. Even in an extreme case like Varian, where you can go full DPS or full tank, because you're elevating some stats at the cost of others, they all end up balancing out, and your overall performance rating doesn't change a whole lot based on your alt choice, just whether you're playing well overall.
Okay, so basically, just like that also brings us a bit to the individual playstyle that you have.
Yeah.
Where people in the community have, for example, asked, what happens if I play my hero a little bit different than others play it? If I have a different playstyle, but it still brings me success as a player, even if as we said, the most important thing is winning the game, but some people were concerned that if they have a different playstyle on the hero, they would get less points because the system thinks they are actually bad just because they play a little bit differently. But as with the choice of abilities, because we have so many factors that we look at, you would actually have a trade-off, and that balances itself out at some point.
Yeah, generally speaking, yeah. If you're excelling in one aspect, you're likely trading off for some other aspect and going back and forth with that. The weightings do come into play, but as you mentioned, the big thing is winning the game, right? If you're playing to win, you're going to excel no matter what. Then how you're doing that is sort of a secondary factor. And I know some people feel like they've got their own unique play style. There are lots of other people playing the same way, right? And so it all ends up averaging out across the whole community anyway.
And you said that the criteria on how it's chosen is that you actually look at the difference between bronze and GM level. So you're actually looking across the board, what factors stand really out on a specific hero that leads people to have a lot of success with that hero. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically. Not specifically bronze to Grandmaster, but there's more granularity in there than that. That's kind of the extreme example. But looking at that, it's kind of interesting too, because not all the stats go up when you do that. Highly skilled games, people don't die as frequently, so some of the stats actually go down. And like you mentioned earlier, we're comparing against likes. So a diamond player is being compared against other diamond players, and a silver against other silver players. So if you're looking at like stats for something like kills or damage done, something like that, it may be that the silver player is actually expected to get more because silver games people just die a lot more than in diamond and master. So.
Okay, so one more thing. We kind of came back on that already a little bit, but I still want to highlight it because the question popped up a lot. And one of the questions that was referred to is that people understand that the system is trying to look at certain stats that you have, and you guys have made one example in the past where you said it's not only what we're looking at the stats screen where I can see siege damage, hero damage, kills, and deaths, but you mentioned that with Kerrigan, CC time, for example, is one of the stats that for her specifically really stands out and distinguishes a top player against a mediocre player or at the lower end of the spectrum. And so the immediate follow-up was that a lot of people got concerned and were first of all worried that there is now a chance to pad your stats on CC time where the system can't really distinguish of whether that is actually, let's call it effective CC because it leads to a kill and sets a kill up, or if it's just someone on Muradin hammering Stormbolts out every opportunity that he gets and accumulates CC time. But if I hear you right, then one of the main arguments against it is that first of all, because we not only look at a single factor, but we look at 20 of them, padding one stat would never really have that effect that all of a sudden the system thinks you are God amongst men, but it just isn't. That's basically what it comes down to. But the system would just, at the same time, you would then, for example, lack in other stats or just even excelling at only one stat but averaging on all the others would just lead to you having a normal game and not all of a sudden the system thinking that you should be way, way higher than you actually are. Yeah,
it's sort of what it breaks down to. Like if you're focusing on some individual aspect of this and attempt to game the system, there's sort of three ways that it can roll out. One, you can be focusing on that stat at the expense of other stats, and you're going to end up actually being likely with a lower performance rating overall because even though you're doing really well in one stat, the other 19 are suffering to some degree. And when I'm talking about weightings here, we're talking like 10, 20% more important. Not this particular one is worth 10 times as much as the next one. You can be kind of a flat line where you're doing really well in this one stat, the rest of them are all slightly degraded and you end up with the same. Or you can be doing really well in this one stat and holding the average or doing better, in which case you're just playing better, and therefore you should be getting a better performance rating.
So the same thing comes also, it can also be used for the reverse, because some people... No, with reverse, I mean actually, because some people are really worried that they said, for example, hey, I have a very aggressive playstyle on a melee assassin, I usually try to be all the way in the action, usually I win my games, I have a great win ratio on my hero, so I perform well, but I tend to have maybe a death or two more than others, just simply because I want to be more aggressive. And they were worried that the system would actually punish them for that. But as he just explained, on the one hand, if you're trying to be very positive on one single aspect, that doesn't lead the system to believe that you should be accelerated faster through the rankings. If on the other hand, there's just one aspect out of 20, or maybe even 2 out of 20, where you are slightly worse than others because you have a different playstyle where aggression leads to a death or two more, that also would not result in you getting punished. So the both sides.
Yeah, it all balances out. Like if you're playing really aggressively and you're doing well, you may die a few more times at the cost of you're doing more damage, you're getting more kills, it all balances out. If you're dying more frequently and your other stats aren't going up as a benefit, you're just not playing that well. So maybe back off a little bit.
And from what I know, you guys also distinguish between when you actually die. So death time matters.
Time matters for all the stats.
So in death time also is not the moment you die, how long will you be dead, but how long are you effectively dead. So if, for example, my team got wiped, I'm the only survivor, the opponent is with 5 men at the core, and I just go in, try my best, but I die at that moment, and the game ends 10 seconds later, that one death at the end with a higher CC time as than a death in the first few seconds is not all of a sudden going to ruin my rating for the game.
Yeah, it's going to be a negligible impact relative to, if you were somehow able to hold that guy off and pause that moment and come back and win, that's a better outcome overall. So don't worry about defending the core at the last minute. Those few seconds dead aren't going to they're not going to affect things.
Especially since one of the aspects that, of course, also comes into play again, since we're looking at so many different factors, is if you are actually dead at some point, and in the late game, it's also that opportunity, or the opportunity cost, because if you die a whole lot in the early or late game, it means not only that you accumulate death time, but also while you're dead, you can't actually, or just sitting in base for that example, you can't accumulate any other stats, so you're not having any impact on the game itself. You're not getting experience, there's no siege damage, there's no hero damage that you get out there. So just like sitting AFK in base for a while because your core is attacked and you're afraid of dying doesn't really help you.
Yeah, that's why dying sucks overall. You're not only feeding the other team, but that opportunity cost for that time you're out is pretty high.
Okay, so coming back to the principle of the system, just like to get back to it. So the most important thing is still winning or losing. That doesn't get replaced. The only factor that comes now in is that in a won or lost game, your performance is an added layer where the system says, is that guy way better than the average, and then you would get accelerated. Do you already have numbers set for that? Like how much, depending, let's say I am currently, let's go back to the extreme.
Sure.
Let's say I am the Grandmaster player that just took over a bronze account. So obviously I would get at the far end of the spectrum. Do you guys already have any kind of numbers, or that gives us a bit of an idea how much I would gain, or how many additional points I would gain?
Yeah, we're tuning and tweaking things. Right now we're looking at about a 50% plus or minus for MMR, and rank points would be plus or minus 50 points, which is closer to 25% of the 200 you usually get for a game.
Okay, and with matchmaking and actually ranked, let's come back to that also for a second, since it's something that doesn't get confused as much, but matchmaking and ranking systems are actually not quite the same here.
No, very different. Yeah.
They are interconnected in the way that the current matchmaker, when it tries to create a match, still takes rank into account, though, right?
Yeah, it takes the rank into account primarily because rank is the only real visual indication of skill in the game currently, and people get understandably upset when they see people of largely different skill from themselves in the games. So if you're a plat player, you want to be playing with other plat players. Even if, if you're playing against a diamond player or a gold player, even if that guy is actually the same skill as you, you can't see that, so it feels weird.
So the new system should also help with that a bit, right? Because
yeah, make sure people are, well,
you should be faster. You should be faster arriving on the rank that reflects your MMR than you do in the current system. Because of the acceleration process.
Yes, and the thing we're adding a personal rank adjustment, which is that plus or minus 50 points we're talking about. That is based off of the performance rating you get, which should help keep you relatively close. And we also have the it's a performance rating adjustment. The personal rank adjustment is the one that currently exists, which is the thing that kind of pulls you toward where your MMR is. That's going to still be in there for the next season, just so we can make sure these things don't diverge too much. I hope to get rid of it with the start of the next season, though.
Okay, that leads me to three different questions I already want to ask, but let's go to the first one. Actually, I don't know which one. Okay, let's go first for...
Sure.
We talked about ranking and MMR.
Yep.
So there's always the big question, why do we have ranking in the first place?
Yeah.
Why not simply display my MMR, my skill level number, and let's base everything off that?
Yep. So there's two different purposes there. So MMR isn't a reward system, it's a measurement. The goal of MMR on the back end is just to be a perfect measurement of your skills so you can make matches. So a lot of people out there talk about how they want to raise their MMR, and that's really not a good way to think of it. You should be just raising your skill. Get better at the game, your MMR will go up. Rank is a reward system. We want to be able to give rewards off of that, so we want it to be able to move quicker. Part of it, too, is because MMR is meant to be a measure of skill, it should move relatively slowly. People don't gain or lose skill dramatically game over game, whereas in rank, we want to be able to reward you when you go on a streak and punish you a little bit when you go on a negative streak, right? If you win 7 to 10 games, I know, it sucks a little bit, sometimes too much. But we want you to be able to have those spikes, those ups and downs, because they feel good. It's also why we reward you based on your highest rank when you get in there, so that those rewards actually, those moments of those spikes feel good.
Is there any plan of making MMR at least visible in the future?
Yeah, I'd like to. Going back to what we were talking about before, the matchmaker currently has to look at rank when taking matchmaking into effect, so that people end up in similar skills or similar games with people of similar skill with them from the rank perspective. If we had visible MMR in place, we could get rid of that requirement, which would just improve matchmaking's ability to make those matches. And then players could look at it and say, you know what, yeah, I've got a guy who's diamond in my game, I'm in a plat, but I'm looking at it, I see his MMR, he's actually a plat tier player, he's just on a streak.
Okay, so one of the questions that also rises automatically with this is, how does, for example, the system adjust once that we have, let's say, a new patch or a new hero comes in? Because when we have a new patch that completely reworks the hero, obviously the numbers or the average numbers on that hero are going to change in some way. And when we have a new hero in the system, a very similar situation occurs where at the beginning the system doesn't really know yet how that hero is supposed to be played. So what exactly happens there then?
Yeah, because we're using effectively machine learning here, the data has to have enough system to understand how to rank these things. And so until that happens, the performance rating just isn't used. It's basically shut off, and it just uses the old system. So for the first period of time after a new hero drops, performance isn't in there at all until the system has enough data to do that. Same thing when we do a major rework, and then there's even some cases where, let's say, I don't know, play Cho'Gall in Master Tier, right? Where there's just not a lot of data to go off of. There are times where those things won't kick in.
Okay, so in that case, it just takes time, and once a certain amount of data is collected, you guys deem relevant enough to actually make a statement about how the hero or what a good performance on the hero looks like, then the new system starts to kick in.
Correct, yeah.
Do you guys have any safety measures in place if the system doesn't really work out? I mean, know that you've been monitoring it for a while. You have said that you run it parallel to the current system just to get data collected and see where would we be if the system was actually active. But do you have now, just as a worst case scenario, also measures in place where you can say, okay, something has happened that we couldn't foresee. How would you react to that now?
Yeah, our engineers are worry warts, so they build in all sorts of fail safes. They've got triggers in place where we could shut this thing off entirely or hero by hero or whatever we need to do on the fly without taking down the games. In addition, even though the system is sort of learning, we're not letting it automatically update itself for the time being. We're going to be manually checking the data before we do that until we're confident that everything is working out properly. You're right, we've been running it for the last few months on live servers in parallel, but because it doesn't have that feedback loop of where the matchmaker is using it yet, until we actually get that going, not 100% confident, so we want to make sure that we've got those extra checks in place. We're manually checking things, then uploading the data. Once it's confident, then we'll let the system start doing it itself.
Okay, so one of the things, just making one step back, we talked a little bit about accumulating data on a new hero or on a reworked hero after a patch, just so that the system knows what's now in play. You already talked a little bit about Cho'Gall on Master League, just like a scenario where we don't see that as much, so it's going to take a little bit longer. So depending on what kind of hero you play, it can be that after a rework, within 2 days, the system has enough data to now use the performance-based matchmaking, or it could last a week if, for example, Cho'Gall in Master League is what you play quite a lot. But the same would also be true then if you're looking at different regions, right? Because we have regions where the population is not as big as in our major regions with Europe and North America. So it's all just basically, it's all a question of how long does it take with the player base that I have on the skill level that is being played with that specific hero to accumulate the data.
Yeah, basically that slice of that particular situation.
Yeah. So I assume the same would then also happen when, for example, the map pool changes, a new map comes into play that hasn't been in the current rotation, just so that the data can be collected.
Right, yeah, because we wouldn't have the data for the most recent period of time for that particular battleground.
Okay. So with that in mind, just a couple of Q&As that we all said there. So I hope that we got a bit of an idea out for you guys on how the system actually works. But the big question, before we go run into a couple of specifics, everybody is worried that the system can be gamed. And
Yes.
I personally think at some point I would say it starts that you don't game the system anymore, the system starts gaming you.
That's the ideal situation, yeah.
So that had to have been concerned. I mean, that system is something that you guys have been thought about for a long, long time right now, so that has to have been a concern at some point. How do you approach this, and what is your answer if someone just like comes in with that question?
A lot of it comes back to what we were talking about before, where you see posts on the community forums of people saying, oh, I'm just going to focus on this particular stat to try to game the system. Doesn't work, right? If you're focusing on that stat at the expense of other stats, your performance is actually going to be lower overall. If you're focusing on that stat and still performing baseline well with the other stats, you're just doing better, right? So that's where you get into the system is gaming you. I'm not saying the system can't be gamed, because there might be loopholes, in which case we'll fix it. But overall, because it's learning itself, like as things adapt, it should be fine. Keep an eye on it, but yeah.
And again, we have to point this out again. I'm sorry, it sounds a bit like a broken record. Wins and losses is still the key factor. You're not going to get points in MMR when you lose the game.
Yes.
So you always have to make sure that is your top priority there. And in a worst case scenario, if you actually feel like, hey, I'm losing the game anyways, now I'm trying to play it safe, you could actually drop even lower, and then all of a sudden you don't only lose the game, the system also says, well, you haven't done anything for the last 5 minutes except for trying to survive, so you are way worse than an average player on that hero, on that battleground, in that time frame, in a game that's lost, because obviously you distinguish between wins and losses as well, and then you lose even more points.
Yeah, that's a good point. You should add that to that example. Not only do you have to excel at a particular stat while keeping the rest of the stats relatively even, you have to win the game while doing that. Right? And then there is the risk of people trying to game the system and causing a bad situation just because they're trying to. They'll do exactly what you're talking about. They're basically just hurting themselves, and hopefully they'll recognize that sooner rather than later. Otherwise, they're just going to drop down to where they're still playing with equal players.
So I think you talked in the past also that the system, because we already talked a bit how it affects basically your stats, and that just like sitting safe somewhere isn't really going to help you. So does that system have an opportunity to also start helping with AFK players, with people that intentionally lose games? Is that something where you already look at maybe expanding the purpose of the system?
Yeah, we've actually already used the system to validate reports for players that were intentionally feeding, for instance. AFK is pretty easy to pick up. Intentionally feeding can be a little trickier because it's hard to tell the difference between somebody that's intentionally feeding and somebody that's just having a bad game. But by looking at a player who, for instance, is consistently doing far below what he should from a performance metric, you can kind of validate those complaints. We'd like to automate that in the future, but right now we're just using it to kind of back up the reports that are coming in from the players.
So basically it makes for you guys, I assume that you just get a massive flood of reports throughout a month.
Sure.
And with that system you just have a chance of validating a little bit more, okay, which are the ones that we actually target first and have a close look at.
Yeah, it was a good validation of the system too. We're working with CS. We got these reports on these players that's intentionally feeding, and the system can go in, look at their games, and be like, okay, yeah, this guy is actually really underperforming. So that's probably a good case where he was doing that.
Okay. That's also coming straight to another concern that people had, where they, for example, said, hey, what happens if I have someone in my team that just leaves after 3 minutes? Obviously, we're probably going to lose that game, but even if we don't, you could assume that a lot of these guys end up in a situation where they produce lower stats than on a normal match.
Yeah.
Is that going to have any effect on the system? Does the system ignore that? Is thanks to the 20 factors that you mentioned before that not even like a measurable factor, or how do you guys deal with that?
Not currently. There's a different feature we want to get that we just call lost forgiveness, basically, that would be looking for situations like that, detecting when somebody was AFK, intentionally feeding, doing these type of sort of poor behaviors, and then making it so the game either doesn't count as much for MMR or doesn't count at all for ranked hits, something along those lines. But that's not part of this particular drop.
And I assume in that scenario you would also try and make sure that not someone decides all of a sudden to leave the game at the end because he feels that for him that would be the better outcome, to just like trigger that moment.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of things you have to do there to make sure people aren't trying to game that system.
But you're already looking to actually expand the purpose of the system and what it can do.
Yep.
Okay. That's
Yeah, it's just not part of this. We want to hold up getting this out there in order to get these extra features in place.
One point that I haven't really talked about, I haven't asked you yet, but we talked about that before. Team compositions.
Yeah.
That's something that people were also worried about. So there's a lot of factors. Basically, the one thing with the performance-based matchmaking system is that every single time you talk about it, so the idea is that you are just compared to players on the same hero, the same map, in a win or lost game, and in the same situation basically, and it compares your stats. But every single time you talk about that, people come in with all kinds of very specific scenarios where they are basically saying, hey, what if I'm a murky and I circle myself 3 times, run to the left first and then to the top?
No, don't go left. Always right.
Always, okay.
Yeah.
What happens then? And so it becomes very specific very fast, and one of the main questions that we oftentimes get, besides the ones that already were addressed earlier, is team composition.
Yeah.
How does the system actually account for team composition? Sometimes I'm a solo tank, my healing numbers will be much better. Yeah. Sometimes I'm in a solo healer, double healer, you can have a solo tank. All kinds of variations that will impact your numbers. How can the system actually account for that?
Yep. It was funny. I actually like this question because it was one that I brought up too when the data scientists were pitching this the first time. The system takes that into account currently, and it's because we looked into it, and the net effect on performance rating is almost it's completely negligible. Basically, if you're looking at it, performance rating as a scale from 0 to 1, it's fluctuating between like 0.49 and 0.51, that kind of thing.
Okay, just to make that clear, he talks about the net effect, not about like that.
Correct.
One
Yeah.
for, let's say, in a double healer scenario where a healer would say, hey, if we have 2 healers in the game, obviously like I as a healer in a double healer team composition can't heal as much. So again, the net effect across 20
Right.
criteria that you guys measure.
Because even though your particular stats may be lesser, like say you're a double tank, for instance, your particular damage taken stats may be lessened because you're not the solo tank there. Other stats are going up because you have more opportunities to do other things. So the net effect overall has been a wash. So we basically we didn't add that additional complexity into the system because it wasn't getting us anything.
Okay, so and also coming back to that, you arrive with that system on a single number. So you said that currently you're looking at an improvement from what you can gain or lose from the current system to the new iteration from plus 50%, either up and down.
Yeah, roughly that, yeah.
Roughly,
Yeah.
but the entire formula that you guys have in place with those 20 criteria usually arrives for you at one number between between 0 and 1.
Yeah.
0.5 would be you have a completely average game. So, and then it's a graduation from then.
Yeah.
So it's not that you reach a certain threshold and all of a sudden you get plus 50%.
Yep.
It just like is a graduating process depending on how well you actually did on that scale.
Yeah, exactly. You're really only going to see the very bottom or the very top for people that are either playing, I don't know, extremely poorly, or somebody in the situation like we showed where it's like a master tier player grabbing a bronze account. Most of the people are going to be fluctuating around that more middle tier where they're just having slight ups and downs, but they're kind of around the average.
Okay, so one question also popped up. I mean, I hope that the main gist of the system actually is clear now. We're going to go through a few more specific questions, which basically come back to a lot of the original points and make things maybe a little bit clearer if there are still questions open. But I hope that the basic idea is by now pretty clear. But there's a lot of specifics. With heroes in particular, you have a pretty complex game, but especially the objectives, of course, have a huge effect as well. So people were then also a bit worried, okay, what happens if I'm, for example, in the dragon on Dragonshire? What happens if I'm God of Terror and I take the plant?
Yep.
All of a sudden, my stats, of course, spike up in certain categories. So should I always try to go for that? How does the system deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, they do, but again, it's being compared against that same battleground and other people in the same situation across millions of different games. So, yeah, some stats are going to go up when you're in the Garden Terror at the cost of other stats. Again, it's that balancing act of while you're in that, you're getting much greater stats than this particular ones, the cost of these other ones, and it washes out over time.
Do you guys plan on making any of the... I mean, I understand that the criteria that you use for the heroes, you're not going to just make those public.
Yeah.
Also, just because simply you want to make sure that people are not really trying too hard to really game anything there, since that would ruin the entire play experience for most
Exactly.
players.
Like, you've been to Reddit. You see how this works? Yeah. Every time we say something, people are like, oh, I'm just going to focus on this particular thing. And
It's
even
kind
though,
of why we're here.
Yeah, exactly. Even though we don't think you can actually game the system by doing that, people trying to do so can cause poor game behavior. So not giving out too much fuel for that, basically.
Yeah, so, but still with the system in place, are you looking to actually helping people to improve their own game by, for example, telling them after a match, listen, these are areas where you can improve?
Yeah, so right now, we're not doing that to a large degree. In ranked play, you'll see the performance metrics. You'll see just a sort of an overall adjustment based on how you did. We do have plans to get what we're just calling the report card in there afterwards, which is a post-game screen you can go look at, and it'll show you what criteria you did well in, which ones you can improve in, that kind of thing. Again, this is something I really wanted to get in, but we didn't want to hold up the system to wait for it.
I'll probably get a soon TM if I ask you when that will be.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I don't have a good time frame for it.
Okay. Yeah, so for now, no feedback or no specific feedback, but more elaborate system than later where you can really tell, okay, this is where I should improve.
I think it'll be really powerful at that point.
Yeah, well, I would definitely love that. Another question is, why should a normal player be excited about this? It was actually a very interesting one, because a lot of people are like, well, I'm not a grandmaster that has a bronze account from a friend right now, so why should I be excited about the new system when I'm a normal player, and how does it affect me?
I'm going to undermine everything I've been talking about here and say that for a normal player,
we shut that off
they shouldn't care about this at all, because all it's doing is on the back end, it's making the matchmaker more accurate in a short period of time. So for them, if they're just playing to win or to lose, just keep doing that. It's great. You don't have to worry about this at all. The net effect for a player is that the overall quality of game should increase because players are more quickly arriving at the matchmaking rating. That's good for them.
And I think it also helps, correct me if I'm wrong here, for people that actually do not play as many games as us. I mean, we know that there's people that grind out 1,000 games or more, like during one season in a very short period of time. But for example, in the old system, when you had a really bad streak during your what are they called? Placement matches.
Games,
Exactly. During the placement matches, you could have a bit of a rough time where you are placed significantly lower than before. Over time, you would of course then rise up again, but if you only have a certain amount of time available and you only can play a limited amount of games, it would take you quite a long time with a new system that's going to happen much faster. And as you said, game quality overall should, because of those things, also improve quite heavily.
Because the matchmaker will have better information on what your actual skill is quicker.
Yeah. How do placements actually work with the new system? Because that has to change at some point. I mean, the whole idea behind a placement system or behind placement games, in case that you guys are not quite familiar with the system that's being used, is that the more games you play in the current system, the more certain the game heroes is actually, the more certain it is that the MMR that you have is correct. So if you've only played 10 games, the system says, I think that's where you belong, but I'm not quite sure yet because you really haven't played a whole lot. If you played 1,000 games, then that uncertainty factor is decreased significantly, and the system basically knows, okay, this is where you belong, and then it takes you a lot more games to actually go away from that number where you have to perform a certain way. Placement matches dilute it a little bit at the beginning of the season so that you actually have an opportunity to either jump up, or if you are actually way worse than you were in the seasons before, that you can fall down. But with the new system, that uncertainty is all of a sudden not really needed to the same extent.
Yeah, it doesn't exist in the same way. So previously we were artificially inflating uncertainty at the start of a season to give players that extra little movement, kind of to help with that complaint of, I've been stuck in whatever rank I'm in for a long time, I feel like I shouldn't be there. And so the uncertainty increase allows you to move more quickly, and the effect drops away pretty quickly. Most of it happens during those 10 placement games. But it also led to sort of that chaos you feel when a new season starts up and everybody's kind of going all over the place. So with the new season, the new system, we don't need to do that anymore. And so that uncertainty boost doesn't exist anymore. Uncertainty itself is still there, but it's being done in a way that's a little more dynamic, I guess. So it's based off of like when you most recently played and whether you're on a streak, that kind of thing instead.
Okay. Basically, we're through the most part, I think.
I thought you had 400 questions.
Oh, I can find some more specifics about like Murky being played on certain maps if you want, but outside of that, I think for the most part we actually have it through. One question was that I found actually quite interesting because I myself didn't know. It's a very specific one, so probably already going a little bit away from it. When is it measured that you took a mercenary camp? How is that measured? Do you have to commit to taking the mercenary down? Do you have to stand in the circle, next to the circle? What happens if I help someone take the mercenary camp but I walk out of the circle before it's taken?
It's anybody who's nearby when the camp is claimed. So.
When it's claimed?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Khaldor's player that drops a quick flame strike to the camp but then walks away, gets nothing?
He's getting credit for all of the damage done to the enemies, but not the claim itself.
That just
but
feels
again,
bad
it's the same thing though. It's like it's just one thing of a minor. It's a minor piece of all the stats are being measured.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a very specific one.
Yes, it is. I actually had to look that one up too because I had people asking that online. I'm like, I'm not quite sure actually.
Yeah,
into that.
I had no idea either. Like that was one of the things where I was like, this is actually like a good question because I had no clue.
It could go a lot of ways. It could be anybody that dealt damage to it. It could be just the guy who made the claim. So it's somewhere in between that.
All right, we have one more thing to add because it actually popped up quite a bit, and I kind of forgot to ask that. So thanks for sitting down again for a second. A lot of people were very worried because they basically said, hey, I'm looking at different games that had a performance-based matchmaking system, didn't work there, why does it work in Heroes? And the prime example that most people came up with is that they look at Overwatch and they say that the performance-based matchmaking system there doesn't do the same or doesn't really have the effect that people were hoping for, and they immediately say like, hey, why would it work in Heroes? And and also the question, is it the same system? And I guess that we can already lay to rest and say like, no.
No, it's a very different system, very different games. The goals are the same, trying to get at performance individual player, but how we go about it is extremely different. So that's pretty much the only thing that they have in common.
It's also two completely different games, so
yeah,
apples and oranges.
Yeah, I can't change out Heroes in the middle of the game, for instance.
Yeah, I would actually say that one of the main, that's personally, by the way, just me, but one of the reasons why I feel that in Heroes, having something like individual performance measurements affect MMR is pretty good in comparison to other MOBAs, for example, just simply because Heroes as the main characteristic, or one of its main characteristics, demands such a huge amount of team play from a player in a team that solo carrying to the extent that we know it from other games is just simply not possible. So you have to work with your team, and of course that in the end leads to either win or loss, but the performance within those parameters is something that is still measurable, where you can excel, whereas in other games, if you have a very high skill, you have a bigger impact on the game as the individual.
Yeah, it's getting at the subtleties behind that. It's harder for a single player to pull an entire game one direction or another. It's much more subtle, but with machine learning and lots of data, we can get at those subtleties.
Yeah, and of course, that comes even more into play. I mean, when we talk about, again, coming to our extreme example, the Grandmaster player on the bronze level has, of course, a much easier time of just shifting the game in one direction. But if you're talking about, let's say, a diamond skill player playing in Plat 1, all of a sudden it becomes a lot harder. So with that system, you have at least a certain pull effect where that player is going to see an accelerate move towards his actual skill level and ranking, which would then in this case be Diamond, for example.
Yeah. By the way, Master players, stop doing that. You're just making games worse for those poor guys.
The challengers?
Yeah, the poor guys in bronze getting stomped on by Masters trying to show themselves off. Yeah,
it's actually always I mean, let's talk about anecdotes for a change. It's always very, very fun when we have any kind of big tournament, like BlizzCon, for example, and you have about 40 pro players that all of a sudden get a platinum account so that they can train on a region where they didn't have an account before. And the first 2 days of them just grinding out games to hone their mechanics are always very interesting.
It was hilarious. We had Matt Cooper, our live lead, was hopping into a live game, and he had one of the pros pop up in there playing Genji, and it was just amazing to watch. We had pretty much the entire live team sitting behind him just watching. He was on, I can't even remember which one, he was on a support character, and his entire goal was keep Genji alive. He just carried the whole game.
For me, it was actually kind of fun because I watched a lot of the guys play, and there were two different scenarios. There was one scenario where basically the people in the team had no idea that they play with a pro, even though it was the original nickname.
Yeah.
And so I remember one game where Snitch, everybody, his whole entire team called him Dick, because they didn't know that was actually the client.
That's awesome.
So sometimes it's just like completely, they have no idea.
Nice.
And in other games, it was that everybody already in the lobby, or basically like in the draft, said, oh my god, we are playing with this guy. First of all, good luck for the upcoming games. And what hero would you like to play?
Yeah.
And what
here you go.
and what do you need from us to carry us? No,
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting.
Those are fun, though.
But yeah.
It's cool to see that interaction happen.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But yeah, anecdotes aside, so I hope that shed some light on the game comparison, and also on another reason why a performance-based matchmaking system in Heroes makes sense over only looking at wins and losses. We covered that at the beginning of the video a bit, but just to finish on that note. So yeah, Travis, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.